The message arrived at 6:12 a.m. It was short, precise, and written as if it knew her life better than she did. By the time the police knocked on her door, the damage was already done. If you want the truth before the lights go out, hit like and subscribe. This case only gets darker from here. Evelyn Harper had rebuilt her life twice already. Once after a quiet divorce that ended 12 years of marriage, and again after she walked away from a man who had promised safety and delivered control. She lived alone now in a modest townhouse near downtown Riverside, Colorado. Clean walls, neutral colors, no reminders. Her phone stayed face down at night. That morning it buzzed anyway. The sender name was unfamiliar. The subject line wasn't, "You don't belong with him." Evelyn deleted it without replying. She had learned not to feed shadows. At 7:03 a.m. another email arrived. Different address. Same tone. More specific. Details only two people should have known appeared line by line: the cafe she visited on Sundays, the route she jogged after work, the scar on her ankle from college. Her stomach tightened. By noon there were 5 messages. By evening 11 they escalated, not loud, not sloppy, calm, methodical, predictive. Evelyn reported the emails to local police that night. The officer listened politely, typed notes, and advised her to block the sender. She did. The next morning, her work email was disabled. A system alert followed. Her personal account had been listed as a recovery address for multiple new inboxes she had never created. Someone was using her name. Carefully. 3 days later, the first accusation landed. A woman named Lauren Pike filed for a restraining order claiming Evelyn had been sending threats, explicit ones, fear-inducing ones. Evelyn didn't know Lauren Pike. She learned the name for the first time inside a county courthouse, standing under fluorescent lights that made everyone look guilty. Printed copies of emails were laid out in front of her. They came from her address. They used phrases she had never spoken. They referenced places she had never been. The judge granted the order anyway. That night, Evelyn slept with every light on. The following week, things turned physical. Lauren reported that someone had posted explicit advertisements online using her name, phone number, and address. Men began showing up at her door. One didn't leave quietly. Lauren blamed Evelyn. The police didn't hesitate this time. They came for Evelyn just after sunset. Neighbors watched from their porches as she was placed in the back of a cruiser, hands shaking, voice steady, eyes wide with disbelief. At the station, Evelyn told them everything. About the alerts, about the fake accounts, about the man who connected them both. His name was Marcus Hale, her ex, a former federal officer, charming, controlled, quietly vindictive. The detective listened, expression unreadable. Then he asked a single question that froze the room. "If you didn't send the emails," he said, "why did they stop while you were in custody?" Outside the station, the night air felt heavier than before. Because somewhere, someone was still writing, and they were far from finished. Evelyn Harper spent the first night out on bail staring at her ceiling, replaying the detective's question until it sounded like a verdict. If the messages stopped while she was locked up, then someone was watching the clock. Her parents wanted to fix it with money and silence. They offered a lawyer and a spare bedroom. Evelyn took the lawyer. She refused the silence. Attorney Miles Chen moved fast. He asked for timelines, screenshots, device logs, anything tied to a timestamp. He didn't promise justice. He promised leverage. The police report was thin. The restraining order was thick. And the narrative was forming around a convenient villain, the bitter ex with motive. Miles pushed for the simplest truth test in the building: location. "Where were you when the first message was sent?" he asked. Evelyn didn't guess. She opened her calendar, her health app, her bank notifications. Her life, for better or worse, had become a trail of receipts. The first email hit at 6:12 a.m. on a Tuesday. At 6:09 a.m., she had checked into Riverside Medical for a follow-up appointment, confirmed by a visitor badge and a time-stamped parking ticket. She'd been in a waiting room with security cameras aimed at the entrance. Miles nodded once. "That's not an alibi," he said. "That's a wall." He sent an investigator to pull the footage before the hospital rotated storage. Meanwhile, Detective Nora Salinas chased the version of events that was easiest to prosecute. She interviewed Lauren Pike, who was living in a panic loop. Lauren's fear looked real: hoarse voice, pale hands, eyes constantly flicking to the windows. That fear made her a powerful witness. Salinas also interviewed Marcus Hale. Marcus arrived at the precinct dressed like a man attending a job interview: crisp shirt, calm posture, answers delivered with controlled sympathy. He spoke about Evelyn as if she were a problem to be managed. "She's spiraling," he said. "I tried to help." Salinas checked his phone location around the first email. Marcus handed over his device without blinking. He appeared to be at his condo across town, then out for dinner later. His timeline printed out neatly. A clean alibi can be the most dangerous thing in a case. The misdirection settled in. Maybe Lauren's fear was turning coincidence into certainty. Maybe Evelyn really had snapped. Salinas didn't say it aloud, but Evelyn felt it anyway, in the way officers stopped meeting her eyes. Then Miles called with a new detail. The email headers showed the messages weren't sent from Evelyn's device. They originated through a rotating chain of servers, bouncing like a pinball. Whoever did it knew how to hide. But one header carried an anomaly: a recovery phone number attached during account creation, a number ending in 7741. Evelyn recognized the last 4 digits instantly. Marcus had used them for years. She forwarded the screenshot to Miles, then sat in her kitchen listening to the refrigerator hum, trying not to imagine how many people had already decided she was dangerous. And that's when her porch camera pinged. A man stood at her door, holding a folded piece of paper like it belonged there. He looked straight into the lens and smiled. The man was gone before Evelyn could reach the door. By the time she stepped onto the porch, the air felt empty, like the house had exhaled without her. The doorbell camera, however, had already captured everything. Miles froze the footage frame by frame. Mid-30s, narrow jaw, trimmed beard. Baseball cap pulled low, shadowing the eyes. The man didn't rush. He stood straight, deliberate, as if he knew exactly how long he needed to be seen. Not Marcus. That detail mattered more than it seemed. If Marcus wasn't the one standing there, then he wasn't acting alone, or he was smart enough to never appear himself. 2 hours later, the house spoke again. Evelyn found the paper folded inside her mailbox, placed carefully, not stuffed. Inside was a printed screenshot of a Craigslist post, explicit, detailed, written in a tone that made her skin crawl. The signature at the bottom was her full name. The address listed belonged to Lauren Pike. The setup was precise. Whoever had done this wanted Lauren terrified, and Evelyn erased from credibility. Every step pushed the story forward without ever touching her directly. Detective Salinas didn't like what she saw. She preferred straight lines, not spirals. But when Miles delivered the porch footage, the email headers, and the VPN data, the case stopped cooperating. The messages didn't originate from Evelyn's devices. They didn't originate from Marcus's either. They traced back to a co-working hub in North Glendale, a building with shared terminals, guest access, rotating keycards, and dozens of anonymous users every day. A perfect place to disappear inside data. Salinas pulled access logs. The list was long, too long: freelancers, consultants, short-term renters, noise layered over noise, misdirection by design. Lauren's fear intensified anyway. She called police twice in one night, reported men knocking. One carried printed directions. Another claimed he had spoken to Evelyn directly. Witnesses were being manufactured. Prosecutors leaned into momentum. They suggested pre-scheduled posts, delayed sends, obsession fueled by distance. Jail, they argued, didn't mean silence. Miles answered with timing. The emails stopped not when Evelyn was arrested, but when her phone was confiscated. And they resumed only after it was returned. That distinction forced a deeper digital dive. Forensics found no drafts, no sent copies, no cached data, no traces of scripting or automation. Evelyn's phone was empty, unnaturally so. Someone wasn't using her device. They were using her access. Marcus surfaced again, not as a suspect, but as a system. Salinas uncovered a small detail buried in archived records. Years earlier, Marcus had registered Evelyn's email as a recovery address on multiple services. For emergencies, he'd written. He never removed it. Then came the formatting glitch. One threatening email contained a spacing error, invisible to most readers. But to digital analysts, it was a fingerprint, a quirk unique to a specific mobile client, a client Marcus had used for over a decade and never updated. Salinas requested his historical service logs. They confirmed it. Control didn't always arrive with force. Sometimes it arrived with foresight. Before Salinas could secure a warrant, the case took a darker turn. Lauren Pike vanished. Her car was found in a grocery store parking lot. Engine warm, door unlocked, phone left behind on the passenger seat. The last outgoing call had been placed to Marcus Hale, and this time there was no clean explanation waiting. Lauren Pike didn't vanish quietly. She vanished through systems designed to remember her. Traffic cameras caught her sedan leaving the grocery store parking lot at 9:18 p.m. The plate was clear. The driver was visible. She was alone, hands tight on the wheel, eyes forward. At 9:41 p.m., the car crossed into the old industrial district, a forgotten grid of warehouses, dead-end streets, and abandoned loading docks where streetlights flickered but never fully died. After that, nothing. No cameras. No sensors, no witnesses. Detective Salinas studied the map spread across the briefing table. She didn't circle the last known location. She boxed it in with a red marker, hard lines pressing inward. Someone wanted her off the grid, she said quietly, but not erased. Search teams found Lauren 12 hours later. She was inside a vacant office suite above a shuttered print shop, dusty windows, unplugged phones, stale air. She was alive, dehydrated, shaking. No restraints, no bruises, no obvious injuries, just fear, the kind that settles into muscle memory and refuses to leave. Lauren's statement came slowly. She said she'd received a text from a private number. The message claimed to be from Evelyn. It said Evelyn wanted to explain everything to end it. The text included a photo, a real one. Evelyn standing outside her own townhouse. Porch light on, taken that same evening. Lauren believed it. She drove herself to the location listed. The building looked occupied. Lights were on. The door was unlocked. Inside, a man waited in the back room. Not Evelyn. He spoke calmly. Told her she wasn't in danger. Said this was temporary. Took her phone. Didn't restrain her. Didn't threaten her. He left before midnight, locking the door behind him. A staged disappearance. Just long enough to deepen the story. While Lauren was being hidden, the narrative moved on without her. Emails began circulating again. This time they weren't hostile. They were apologies. Messages sent from Evelyn's address, remorseful, fractured, convincing. They referenced sealed details from the restraining order hearing. Language only someone close to the process would know. Public sentiment shifted almost instantly. Miles Chen tracked it in real time. Engagement spikes, reposts, screenshots stripped of context. Someone was steering attention with surgical precision. He finally got the warrant. Marcus Hale's condo revealed nothing at first glance. Minimalist, controlled. No burner phones, no hidden drives, no printed ads. But control doesn't live on surfaces. Digital forensics uncovered a private cloud folder synced across 3 devices. Inside were archived emails, behavioral templates, timestamped drafts, and cross-referenced notes. Lauren, Evelyn, others. Marcus hadn't acted emotionally, he'd acted operationally. One document froze Salinas in place. A timeline titled Phase 3. The final line read, subject isolated, credibility neutralized. Exit window viable. At 2:07 a.m., Marcus Hale boarded a red-eye flight to Vancouver. He didn't flee. He executed a plan, and for the first time Salinas understood the real threat. This wasn't revenge, it was practice. Marcus Hale's departure hadn't been rushed. It had been synchronized. By the time the warrant reached airport security, his flight was already cutting across the Rockies, altitude steady, signal gone. Detective Salinas watched the status update refresh on her screen and felt the familiar weight of being late, not by minutes, but by intention. Marcus had expected pursuit, which meant he had prepared for it. She pivoted away from airports and borders and into behavior. Financial records showed no panic, no emptied accounts, no frantic cash grabs. His cards remained active, modest purchases, predictable intervals, coffee near the harbor, public transit passes, a bookstore that specialized in used paperbacks. Vancouver wasn't an escape route, it was a workstation. Salinas followed the digital residue instead of the man. Encrypted backups revealed repeated contact with a single consultant, Ethan Rowe. Rowe wasn't a hacker in the cinematic sense. On paper, he was a freelance IT specialist who marketed himself as a reputation stabilizer. He erased footprints, redirected blame, made chaos look like coincidence. Salinas brought him in quietly. Rowe spoke like someone used to negotiating risk. He admitted knowing Marcus, described the work as technical, detached, procedural, VPN routing, email masking, account mirroring, nothing personal, until Salinas slid the Phase 3 document across the table. Rowe stopped talking. His eyes lingered on the language, not shocked but unsettled. He admitted Marcus had outlined a psychological pressure test, framed as corporate sabotage fallout from a hostile separation. Rowe claimed he hadn't known the target was innocent. That might have been true. It just wasn't enough. Back in Riverside, Evelyn Harper existed inside containment. Her attorney advised silence. Her friends stopped calling. Neighbors offered polite nods and nothing else. She slept in fragments, waking to check locks that had never failed her before. Then the mail arrived, a plain envelope, handwritten address. No return. Inside was a flash drive. Miles Chen didn't let Evelyn touch it. He sent it straight to forensic analysis. The contents were organized with unnerving care, folders by date, by trigger, by reaction. It wasn't evidence. It was a manual. At the center sat a voice memo, Marcus's voice, calm, clinical, familiar. She complies when isolated. Fear accelerates belief. Credibility collapses faster than resistance. Below it, a single line had been added later. If she fights, escalate. Salinas understood the architecture at last. Lauren Pike hadn't been the objective. She'd been the audience. Evelyn was the endpoint. They issued an international warrant that night: coercive control, identity exploitation, unlawful confinement, obstruction. Not enough to act fast, but enough to bring him back. Eventually. Extradition, however, moved slower than obsession. Marcus still had time. At 11:47 p.m., Evelyn's lights cut out. Not the block, just her unit. Her phone vibrated in the dark. One message appeared. You were always safer when you listened. Across town, Salinas's phone rang. Vancouver Port Authority had logged a late-night ferry departure. One passenger flagged for secondary review. Destination: Seattle. Marcus Hale wasn't running anymore. He was repositioning. And the game he'd been playing quietly for months was about to end loudly. Marcus Hale crossed the border just before dawn. No disguise, no urgency, no visible tension. Customs logged him as cooperative, calm, forgettable. The kind of man officers stopped remembering the moment he walked away. His answers were measured, polite, professional. Then he disappeared into morning traffic like someone returning to a routine he had rehearsed many times before. Detective Salinas landed in Seattle 6 hours later with a narrowing window and an even thinner margin for error. She didn't chase Marcus directly. She chased his habits. Marcus never moved without infrastructure. Ferry footage showed him exiting on foot. No luggage, no waiting car, no visible contact. That meant one thing: he planned to build support locally. Salinas cross-referenced old service overlaps. training cohorts, former federal colleagues, private contractors who specialized in logistics and anonymity. One name surfaced repeatedly: Caleb Wright. No criminal record, no online footprint worth noting, quiet income streams, short-term rentals registered under shell LLCs. Wright owned a furnished unit near the waterfront. When officers entered, the apartment felt abandoned but not neglected, recently cleaned, sheets stripped, trash removed, no personal items left behind, but the router was still warm. Forensics pulled access logs. A single device had connected for exactly 42 minutes, enough time to upload files, enough time to send instructions, enough time to watch something unfold remotely. Marcus hadn't stayed, he'd coordinated. Back in Riverside, Evelyn Harper wasn't waiting anymore. When the power returned, she didn't feel relief, only confirmation. She packed with intention: documents, backup phone, chargers, copies of the flash drive. She left the townhouse before sunrise, disabling her own location services for the first time in years. She drove without a destination. Miles Chen called when he realized she was gone. His voice was sharp with concern, layered with legal warnings: violation of conditions, optics, risk. Evelyn listened. Then she made the decision she should have made months earlier. She went to the only place Marcus had never fully controlled: his past. At a regional training facility outside Spokane, Salinas hit resistance. Records sealed, administrative delays, paperwork shuffled between departments that didn't want old problems reopened. Time bled away. Then a junior analyst noticed something misfiled. An internal incident report dated years earlier, never escalated, never prosecuted. A trainee had filed a complaint against Marcus. She described isolation, professional sabotage, threats framed as mentorship. Her credentials had been quietly downgraded. Her career stalled. The report had been closed with no action, the pattern locked into place. Salinas issued an emergency pickup order, but Marcus was already ahead of the clock. Evelyn reached the facility first. She didn't go inside. She didn't call anyone. She waited. At 4:26 p.m., Marcus's car rolled into the lot. He stepped out slowly, scanning the area, and then he saw her. For the first time, the mask slipped. No anger, no shock, just recognition. "You always needed closure," Marcus said, voice calm, almost kind. Evelyn said nothing. She raised her phone and pressed record. Marcus smiled. And because control had always worked before, he began to explain. Behind them, unmarked vehicles moved in without lights or sirens. And for the first time in a very long time, Marcus Hale realized something fundamental had shifted. He wasn't directing the ending anymore. He was standing inside it. Marcus Hale spoke the way he always had, calmly, precisely, as if the right tone could still rewrite reality. He framed everything as logic, as necessity, as care. He explained how fear worked better than force, how credibility collapsed faster than resistance, how institutions trusted systems more than instincts, and how easy it was to exploit that trust if you understood timing. Evelyn didn't interrupt him. She watched his reflection ripple faintly across the dark screen of her phone and understood something that chilled her more than the threats ever had. Marcus believed this moment was still negotiable. "That first email," he said, pacing slowly across the empty parking lot, "was never meant to destroy you. It was a correction. You were drifting. I needed you focused." The word lingered in the air. Correction. Detective Salinas heard it too as she stepped out of the lead vehicle, her boots quiet against the pavement. Officers spread out naturally, not rushing, not escalating. Marcus still hadn't noticed them. Evelyn let him keep talking. He described the VPN routing like a lesson. The mirrored inboxes. The way recovery emails could be weaponized without touching a victim's device. He explained how online platforms favored consistency over truth and how repetition created belief. Lauren Pike, he said, had been unfortunate collateral, necessary to anchor the narrative, a witness who didn't know she was one. "You should thank me," Marcus added. "I stopped before it became irreversible." That was when Evelyn finally spoke. "You didn't stop," she said quietly. "You paused." Marcus's eyes flicked up. He noticed the vehicles, the spacing, the silence that wasn't empty anymore. Selena stepped forward and identified herself. Her voice was level, professional. Final, Marcus adjusted his stance, asked for a lawyer. No resistance, no denial, just the posture of a man who had always expected procedure to protect him. This time it didn't. The evidence came together cleanly. The flash drive. The cloud archives synced across devices. The co-working access logs. Rose's testimony, cautious, incomplete, damning. Lauren's statement, rewritten now without fear shaping the words. And the recording Evelyn had captured Marcus explaining, unguarded, convinced of his own justification. The arrest happened without spectacle. The trial didn't dominate headlines. There were no graphic details, no emotional outbursts, just experts explaining coercive control, how isolation could be engineered, how identity could be bent until a person doubted themselves more than the evidence. Marcus Hale was convicted on multiple counts. Decades followed. Evelyn Harper didn't attend sentencing. 3 months later she moved, changed her number, changed her routines, not to disappear but to reclaim authorship of her own life. Lauren Pike started over too. New city, new name. No contact, no closure conversation. They didn't need one. Detective Salinas closed the case on a quiet afternoon. She added a final note in the margin before filing it away. Predators don't always chase. Some wait. And some are only caught when their victims stop being predictable. If this case stayed with you, subscribe and leave a like. And tell me, do you think Marcus would have stopped on his own, or was this ending inevitable the moment he pressed send?